welcome to the Awakened and Aligned podcast. This is a brand new podcast dedicated to you and your journey to wholeness. I'm your host, Shannon Kaiser with Play with the World. And this whole new direction and this whole new podcast is focused on tools to help you uplift yourself and connect to the true self and your true power with more grace and ease. We all want more ease right now, right? So in fact, I've hand selected the guests that I will be bringing you and world-renowned experts and authors to help support you on your journey. So this is going to be an exciting season. We're kicking off the show today with a special guest who can help us heal in ways that we haven't thought of before. You know, I've been doing a little bit more kind of deep dive, and I've been working with clients, and what I've seen over the past couple of weeks, especially in the times that we're in, is a lot of people are just overwhelmed. They're kind of over it. And if you realize prescription fills for anxiety and depression on drugs, they reached an all-time high last year. Coronavirus, it's impacted all of us, and it's especially impacted our mental health in so many ways. From feeling exhausted to overwhelmed to not being able to get out of bed in the morning, depression seems to be happening for a lot of us. And I've learned in my own personal journey that depression has a spectrum, and what's really exciting is who I am bringing you today. She meets us wherever we are on that spectrum, and she's going to give us clear guidance forward. So I invite Amy Scher today. She is going to be our guest on the show, and she has best-selling books that have been endorsed by prominent physicians, and she's helped thousands of people overcome chronic illness and emotional challenges, including herself. She's the author of the brand new book, How to Heal Yourself from Depression When No One Else Can, with Sounds True, which is the same publisher as my future projects. And what's really cool, Amy brings and talks a lot about being human and healing in your humanness. I had an opportunity to attend she does group sessions, and I had a chance to join one of the group sessions, and her techniques are amazing. Within 15 minutes of the session, I already felt a release and healing. So we're in for a treat today. I'm really excited, but I want to let you know that even if you don't suffer from depression or anxiety and you're feeling pretty good, I hope you stick around for the whole show, because Amy's concepts and teaching, they apply to any area of our life. In fact, if you're looking for more balanced stress relief, these tools are going to really help. Whether you are really trying to lose weight or overcome chronic illness or just looking for more self-love and confidence, I can't wait to share her insights with you. So Amy, welcome. How are you?
Hi, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here.
Oh, I'm so happy. Congratulations on your brand new book. How are you doing? How you feel? It's out in the world.
Thank you. I know it's a crazy thing. I know we're probably not supposed to have favorite. I'm not a mom, so I don't know. I know we're not supposed to have favorite children or maybe favorite books, but this book is my favorite. Yeah. So I'm pretty excited. It happens, right?
Oh, I love that. I feel the same way each time a book comes out. So it's so good. Well, thanks for I had a chance, and I've been able to read your book ahead of time, and now that's out in the world, people can get it. But what's interesting is you start the whole entire book. You say, my story, your story, every story. And when I first read that header, I was like, yes, because truly we all have a story. And then when I got into it, it made so much sense. So can you talk a little bit more about your story, of course, but why you kind of positioned it in that way?
Yeah, the reason that I positioned it in that way and started with that header, that was the very first thing. I don't always write all my books in order. I don't know how you do, but I don't always write from start to finish. But that's the piece I wrote first, because this book is truly for everyone. I think we all have such overlapping stories when it comes to depression. And my perspective is that depression does happen on a spectrum from, feeling blue or blah, or, feeling exhausted to really not being able to get out of bed. And it does happen on a spectrum, and everybody's so different, yet our stories overlap. And I think that we need to recognize other people's stories and ours and other people's, because that's what helps us all, right? Remember years ago when no one was talking about any of this, and now more and more people are talking about it because more and more people are talking about it. So I really wanted to write that section for all of us, for to share a little bit about my story, which is essentially that I had healed from a decade long severe chronic illness, or a grouping of chronic illnesses, I would say, um, and got and had everything I sort of wanted in life. I was an author. I was helping people. I was married and happily married, and had just bought a house and living in Los Angeles, and all the things I wanted, and yet had this heavy energy around me, and had this feeling like I was really bogged down and just sort of teary and overwhelmed. And this was a few years ago. In the previous year, I had gone through a health crisis with a family member, and it was definitely a hard year. But I sort of had to stop and think, like, why or how do I have everything I want and still feel like shit, for lack of a better term? And and it was then that I realized that depression is really something that happens when we get buried by the stuff of our lives. Maybe it's the trauma, the pressures, whatever it is, we get buried. And I think we can all relate to that, which is why I started the book talking about your story, my story, every story. And it, because it really can happen to anybody and everybody. And Shannon, you and I both know, as people who have tools, we aren't exempt from feeling depressed. We aren't exempt from sometimes feeling anxious, or having physical things come up in our body. And it's important to talk about that, I think.
Yes, absolutely. And I hear what you're saying, because I suffered from depression myself, and that's kind of how I got on this journey. And I remember reading a quote from Jim Carrey that said, depression is the avatar that you're tired of playing the character that you've been playing. And I feel like that's so much of what you talk about in the first part of this book too, because you say depression is literally the depression of self. And you went through that. And it's almost like we're kind of hiding a piece of ourselves, or not awake to the full potential that exists within. Talk a little bit more about your personal awakening and how you broke through that.
Yeah, and I think it can be that, and it can also be that we're not living for ourselves. That's personally what I went through. Was, I had overcome these chronic illnesses, and then I sort of went on to help other people do the same. And I think at some point, especially when the family member was having the health crisis, and I was there for that person, and then I was there for my clients, and then I was writing books. I think, like, I ended up at the very end of my list. And that's okay. That happens sometimes, and we catch it, right? But I
Yeah.
think for me personally, I felt for many years like I was making up for lost time, because really I was sick for and severely debilitated for much of my 20s. So when I got into my 30s, I sort of felt like I was making up for lost time. But then what happened was, I sort of was trying to, I think at a subconscious level, maybe catch up. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I was trying to, like, get my, like, I had friends who had these, like, big careers, and I mean, I didn't go to college. I didn't have, I felt like a little bit of a late bloomer in so many ways, and I still don't have a college degree, which I'm fine about. But the point, I think, is that in my 30s, I was like, oh my gosh, now I have to do everything. And now I have to help all these people who were in the position that I was. And in that process of healing from my own stuff and helping other people and trying to do things to make the world a better place, and to make up for this lost time, I actually became disconnected from myself. And I think this is really common, but I ended up sort of on this train going a million miles an hour, and then never really stopped to find out if I was still happy on that train, or if maybe that train was moving a little too fast, or if I was doing anything except for riding that train to, my point B and C that I was trying to get to. And that's personally what I think happened to me. And what I learned in this, and what I think the lesson is for everybody, is that finding joy, or finding our well being, is not something we do once, check off the list, and then move on from. It is a continual process of being attentive to our own lives, needs, and desires. And that was what I missed during my initial healing journey. And that is what I missed in the years that came after that, was that we have to continually check in with ourselves, because we are evolving human beings. And what I set off to do 10 years ago is certainly not the same or doesn't look the same as it does now. And so I think that's an important thing. That was sort of my story and my epiphany, but that's an important thing for everybody to look at, is that we have to keep being attentive to who we are and where we want to go.
Absolutely. It's really about the realigning, is what I'm hearing, and allowing yourself to grow in
Yes.
kind of changing with the changes that are happening in your life. You bring up such a good point, because I truly, all of the work that I do as well is really about coming back to yourself and knowing that you do matter. And it's not from a selfish place, but I still feel that so many of us have that belief. And I know you hear this with your work and all the work that you're doing as well. How did you kind of move from a place of being there for everyone else because you care so much and want to help the world, to I have to show up for myself, and it is not selfish, but the most self-loving thing I can do? What is that switch?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, and this is, I don't know who else will relate to this, but it switches for me when I fall apart. Like when I wake up one day and I'm like, "Oh my God, I don't feel good. I'm exhausted. I'm miserable." Like I am just not a person who learns lessons easily. That's something I kind of find humor in at this point. So for me, it sort of hit me like a brick. Like, wait a second. I am I am so on this train of living my life to help people and to make up for lost time and to do all of this, all things that I love to help people. It's not that I don't, but it's just that the focus, I had shifted the focus completely off of what I wanted or needed, even in terms of taking a respite, resting, relaxing, finding joy in just doing nothing sometimes. And so I think that was really just an important thing, is that we just need to keep looking at who we are, what we want, what feels good to us, and hopefully before it becomes sort of a crisis. I've gotten better over the years where the crisis doesn't happen so big and it doesn't last so long, but I definitely get hit with big moments where it's like, this is my boundary. So I think that's the key, is what is our boundary in terms of how we care for ourselves and what we might have to put aside to do that, and figuring that out, and then constantly paying attention to when we're getting too close to that boundary.
Yeah, I think boundaries is kind of the foundation. I learned in my own journey as well how important those boundaries were. And when I'm hearing you talk, it keeps coming back to joy. And I want to thank you so much for putting my quote in your book in one of the first part,
Yes.
because the quote, as I was writing Joy Seeker, Amy and I are actually in an author's mastermind together, and we meet often and share with other authors what we're up to. And I remember talking about joy, and I shared the book with her, and she said, "I'm writing this new book. Can I please put this in there?" But as you open the book, what's really special is, here's this powerful book, How to Heal Yourself from Depression When No One Else Can. And to set the tone, you say, "Joy sat me down and said, I miss you." And that's one of the quotes that I open Joy Seeker with. And it really resonates because it gets us to a place of seeing how far we have disconnected from ourselves. Talk a little bit more about that and how that leads you into the book.
Yeah, and this was the perfect, I love quotes. So typically in my books, I put a lot of quotes, but in this book, I only put one quote because I felt like nothing could say it better than how you said it in that quote, which is that we don't realize sometimes what we're missing, or what we've been consumed with, until it leaves a gaping hole inside of us. And
Mm-hmm.
I felt like Joy sat me down and said, "It's time to talk. I've missed you," is such a prolific and important, just such an important phrase, because that's what happens. That joy sat me down feels to me like this is serious in a loving way,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
serious.
Yes.
And that is almost the realization many of us need to come to, that this is serious. We have to take ourselves and our own joy seriously, because it is such an integral part of our life, our health, our well-being, our career, our relationships. It matters for everything. We can't put joy on a back burner and expect that our life is going to be good. We
Right.
can't. And so
Absolutely.
when I saw this quote, it was like, that's the quote that has to set the tone for the entire book. And I just love that's all that needed to be there. I didn't need any other quotes for this book, because that is the crux of what I'm teaching in this book. And what's important is that you can't have all the things you want unless you pay attention to who you are and your needs and desires, and you allow space for that joy. You
Yeah.
can't. Nothing good will come from living your life for everybody else. Nothing good will come from not evolving as you need to. It's just, you can't have the things you want. And so I felt like that was such an important thing to come to get across.
And that means so much. And I'm glad that you shared it in that way. As you're talking, it makes me realize, and I've seen a lot of posts lately on social media from people and clients, and I'm in a couple private groups, and people are just really exhausted right now. I mean, here we are with almost everything that's going on in the world. There's an emotional exhaustion, and of course, coronavirus, COVID, and how it's affecting our mental health. And I don't feel like that's getting talked enough about. It's more the numbers and the cases and the mandates, but there is this huge side, like the elephant in the room, if you will, is the mental health aspect of all of the effects. And what I have seen too is a lot of people are in such fear that they're afraid to reach for joy, or they can't even fathom self-love or showing up for themselves. And then there's also the place where a lot of people are saying, it's now or never. I am showing up for myself. So again, it's a spectrum, but no matter what, we get to a point where it feels like there's a little bit more of a exhaustion, because we're still in this suspended state of reality. We still don't know what's unfolding in the future, how long we're going to be in this. So I would love to hear your thoughts on, from your perspective, and maybe sharing some tools from your book on how we can help from a mental health aspect of kind of coming back to ourselves and knowing that we can make it through stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is such a trying time. I mean, that's an understatement, of course. It is such a trying time. I think, though, what I've seen, and I've seen this, even before COVID came along, but whatever's going on in the world tends to trigger our own unresolved emotional baggage or stuff.
Yeah,
And so I think, excuse me, not only is this, a difficult, time where so many people are struggling, but it's more than just what's happening now. It's an opportunity to heal some of the things that we haven't healed in the past. And I'm happy to share a couple of tools to start doing that. I think, really processing our emotions is so important now. I think a lot of people are going to come out of this, you know not having done the self-care or self-love that they need, and try to just get back to life. And I don't think that's going to go very well. I think those of us who really try to process this and try to find our own moments of joy and to do whatever we can. Everybody has different capacities, everybody has different resources, of course, but whatever we can each do within our abilities to really be present in even the uncertainty, and to work through some of those emotions, I think it's going to be easier afterwards, and to move forward.
yeah,
So I think that's one thing. I think for me, and I don't know how you feel about this, Shannon, I would love to hear, but I feel like, and I'm a very, like, I don't watch the news all day, but I definitely, like, read, and, I do kind of keep in the loop of what's going on, but it's limited. Like, if I knew everything that was going on all of the time and I watched all the numbers, I would be as much of a wreck as everyone else who's watching all the numbers all the time. So
absolutely.
I think for me, part of self-care is being conscious about how much you're taking in. And I tell my clients and my students this all the time. I am not one to dismiss reality at all. So I have a for me, the balance is acknowledging what's real and what's true and what's going on, while also deciding that I don't need to participate in it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because for me, that would be detrimental. So it's finding your own balance of sort of unsubscribing to, sort of, I guess we could say, unsubscribing to that constant news cycle that doesn't allow any room for joy or for the calming, energy that nature brings, that being with yourself brings. So I think there's in terms of two things we can do. One, I think, is to disconnect to whatever extent feels comfortable to you from all the stuff that's constantly pelting your nervous system,
Right.
while also doing some of the work to process this emotional energy that's coming up. And that to me feels like a really good balance. I'm not one of the people who could never know what's going on, but I still have to be really careful that I don't know what's going on every second, because how is that helpful to me and how is that helpful to those around me?
Yeah, I found as you're talking to, and what I've seen with some of my clients, and kind of what I hear you saying too, is there's a level of, it's not detachment, but a level of preservation that happens. And when we can preserve our own sanity, if you will, or our own balance, I love that you use the word balance, we can actually return back to us and become the creators that we are. I believe human beings need to create, and I'm not talking like being a painter or writer. Maybe that's what it is, but creating could also be having a really good conversation with a loved one, or creating new moments of nature time, or creating a beautiful meal. So it gets us back, because when you're constantly focusing on things that bring your energy down, it contributes to that cycle of that depression and that uneasiness and anxiety. So everything you say I agree with, as far as bringing back your power and reclaiming it, and focusing on the moments that you can control. And then in that space, you start to open up to, well, what can I do? And that's where the joy can come in. You invite the joy in. So I love how you position that.
Yeah, and
That's
and I would love to share a technique for people to start releasing some of the emotional stress and baggage, because I think that that's where the joy comes in. It's almost like the joy is revealed. It doesn't have to come in. So as we release the other stuff, the joy can be more easily revealed. And sometimes we need a tool to help reveal that.
yeah, I love it. Let's go.
So let's do something called thymus tapping. And I'm saying thymus like Thymus. And this is the master gland of the immune system, which sits behind the breastbone. So you're not going to be able to feel it, but we're going to tap in the area that over where it is. So if you find where the notch is in your neck where you would tie a bow tie, or where a bow tie would sit, and you go about an inch below, just slide your finger down and you start to tap in that area. Just go ahead and tap on your chest. Some people will feel a little raised area in their breastbone. The thymus gland sits under that. Your thymus gland is linked to your energy system, so your meridians, your chakras. Um, and when we tap the thymus gland, we release stress and emotional baggage from the energy system, while also rebalancing our immune system. By tapping this gland, there's a lot that goes on to help support your immune system. And we're releasing stress, which is tied into the immune system. So, what I like to do and teach students to do is to tap that gland and to just sort of feel whatever you're feeling in the moment. And you can just tap with 3 or 4 fingers of whatever hand you want. And take some deep breaths as you do. And we're not going to try to think of anything in particular. We're not going to try to push anything away. We're just going to, for a second, tap and feel how we feel. Let any feelings or thoughts come up in these moments as you tap. And take a couple big deep breaths. And what we're doing is tapping and using the percussive effect of the tapping to sort of send a swish through, or a swish or a flow through the thymus gland, through the energy system, to sort of swish out or tap out any stuck emotions, feelings, stuck stuff that's causing stress on our system right now. And I like to tap and also say releasing, releasing, releasing. So you could say that a few times as well, but it's just sitting for a minute or two and tapping and then tapping and allowing your body to let go of that stress that's sort of sitting on your system. And in my book, How to Heal Yourself from Depression When No One Else Can, I teach a very specific way to use this to identify exactly what emotions are stuck. But for the purposes of us chatting right now, this is a great general way to use it that you can do anytime. You just sit, you tap, and you let whatever you're feeling just be there. And it really does help to move that energy out of your body so that you can process it and reveal that joy that's all around you.
It's beautiful.
And
Thank
it's
you.
easy. You don't have to,
Yeah.
it's so easy to remember. And that's what we need right now. When you were talking about feeling overwhelmed before,
Yeah.
that's what we need right now. We need these little tools. We don't always have the, and I'm not a big meditator, so I might be biased because of my own attention span, but we can't always sit and meditate for 30 minutes. Sometimes we need something that works in 1 or 2 minutes. And so I love this thymus tapping technique for that reason.
You know what's so interesting about I was doing this with you as you were talking about it, and I know the power of tapping, but as the processed emotions that we haven't allowed ourselves to feel come up, I've noticed, and this is the same with perhaps meditation or any tool we align to that helps us go deeper within. I feel that there's often a point where it can get very scary to like a bubbling up of emotion that we haven't allowed ourselves to feel. How would you recommend or what would you suggest to have clients, people, or anyone listening here who might be a surge of emotion comes up that they're not quite aware of to move through that and know that it's actually safe and you're being guided in a place of love?
Yeah, I mean, I typically just continue tapping. When things come up that are unexpected, I usually continue tapping until I feel it shift. You could also take deep breaths and imagine blowing it sort of out of your system. But what I tell people to feel safe is people say, "Oh my gosh, I opened Pandora's box," or "Oh my gosh, I feel something I didn't feel before." And I always say, "No, you were feeling it all along. That's why you felt terrible. You've just acknowledged it now."
Yeah.
So people do tend to resist doing emotional work because they say that they don't want to, open up something. And I always say, but the reason you feel depressed or anxious or whatever it may be is because you are feeling a low level of something, of the anger, the sadness, the resentment, whatever it is, all the time. It's there. You're not it's been awakened. You just haven't put it together that that's why you feel bad. So
Absolutely.
so it's going a step in the right direction to actually do the work to allow it to come up. And sometimes if it's been buried really deep, it feels strong when it comes up. So while you're tapping, you may feel like, oh my gosh, suddenly I feel really angry. And just keep tapping. It's only because it's closer to the surface than it was before. So instead of feeling it at a low level constantly, you may feel it a little bit more intensely, but it will move out when it's closer to the surface of your body versus when you have it so deeply buried.
Yes, exactly. That's so powerful because it is about feeling the feelings. And you know what's so amazing is on the other side of it is release, is freedom, is this emotional. There's such a powerful part of feeling our emotions and healing. And so when you get to the other side of it, you realize that it's not as scary because you've allowed yourself to process, to transmute those. And so, in your book, you actually talk about this in a way where you talk about invisible emotions and
Yes.
how they can affect us negatively. Is that kind of what you mean with this, or what?
Yeah, yeah. I just think w- we don't recognize how we feel sometimes. We get, and I'm sure you hear this too, Shannon, but we get so used to saying, I feel anxious, I feel anxious, I feel anxious, I feel depressed, I feel depressed. It almost becomes a mantra. And the words or the words depression and anxiety are very general. That doesn't tell us how we actually feel. What I've learned is that there are real, true emotions under that. And depression and anxiety are sort of a side effect of the invisible emotions. Depression in itself or anxiety itself, I wouldn't consider an emotion. I
Right.
believe that there are things like anger, sadness, grief, those things, when suppressed, sort of create the energy of depression or anxiety. So the invisible emotions, and I walk people through this in the book, is really identifying what exactly do you feel? Because if you go around every day just saying, I feel depressed, I feel depressed, I feel depressed, you're not actually getting anywhere. You still haven't identified what the actual issue is. You are
Mhm.
just repeating a mantra of, I feel a certain way. But why do we feel that way? That's really what my work is helping us find is digging to the root, because until we figure out what emotions are actually creating that energy of depression, we can't really address them, right? We're just sort of going on and on about a general feeling we have. And the same I find is true for anxiety. People say to me, I just feel anxious. I just feel anxious. And I say, okay, so but some emotions, there are specific emotions in creating that feeling of being anxious. Feeling anxious is the feeling of I have emotions bubbling up that I don't know what to do with. That's the feeling of being anxious. Anxiety in itself, if you just keep identifying with something broad like anxiety or depression, it can be really hard to help it shift because you're not really getting to the specifics of it.
Yeah, absolutely. As you're saying that, it makes me go back to you living in LA and feeling like these emotions. And so, can you
Yes.
take me through your process, what your discovery of your root emotion was in the situation? Because now you live in New York and you're happy and it's a whole different life, right? But there was a point in between where you had to awaken to the root.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, what it was the grief of being last on my list. It really had nothing to do with geography. It really had nothing to do with that, even though coming out of that space really did help me to feel like I was ready for a new adventure because because I was sort of resonating more with joy than that other heavy energy. But I just sort of realized that I was last on my list. I was so preoccupied with taking care of other people and doing X, Y, and Z and getting to where I wanted to go, which I had decided, 10 years earlier. And things just weren't fitting for me anymore. I guess that's more what it was.
Yeah.
And then also I had had that really hard year, and it's hard to process all your emotions in when you're within the trauma of them. I definitely did a good job because I knew all of the things that I should be doing, and I was doing tapping, and I was using all the techniques. But the part that I missed, which I'm sure we're going to talk about at some point, the part that I missed was taking action in my life. I really, really missed that because I think, I don't know if you can relate in any way, Shannon, but when we're spiritual and we've tapped into the sort of spirituality of ourselves and the self-love and the trusting of the unfolding, I personally went too far in that direction. I personally trusted the universe so much, did so much energy work that I actually missed the part about having free will, and that if I wanted to change something, sometimes I didn't need to wait for the universe. Sometimes I didn't need to do any energy work. Sometimes I didn't need to figure out, what to do about emotion X, Y, and Z or my past trauma. All of those things are vehicles for helping me be empowered. But sometimes I could just decide that I needed to change something in my life. And that was a huge missing piece for me. And I think that's something that we all need to think about. How much do we lean on spirituality and these tools, and how much should we be making sure that we're not using the tools to bypass our willpower and our ability, not our willpower, our free will. And yeah, I guess our willpower in some way to push through scary times when we can, and make a decision, make a change, get out of a toxic relationship, say no, set up those boundaries. We don't need to trust the universe and look for signs, or there are certain things we don't need to rely on our spiritual principles for, maybe to help us feel more courageous and empowered. But sometimes we have to stand up and take a stand in our own lives when we're able, and just take the action we need to take. And that was something that really helped to shift me out of the depressive energy as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the key as far as taking action. And where you're taking action is by honoring yourself and your own well being. The action is because you realize I deserve better. I want to feel better. I am taking the reins of my own life. So it does become this process of empowerment, which is really the theme of all of what you're talking about and all the work you do. It really does come back to you have the power to live your truest potential. And I feel that that's what I got as I was going through your book. There's a lot of these tools, and what's really special is all of these techniques. But it's not just about staying in that anxiety or depression or understanding, okay, here's why it happened. It's the other side of that, the whole life that you can create from a place of thriving. Talk a little bit more about the outcome once we get through all this. And
Yeah, yeah. So I think the outcome is that we need to focus on our needs and desires, and we have to take the actions that we're able to get there. I can't tell you how many emails I get every year that start off with, "Dear Amy, I'm in a toxic relationship or an abusive relationship, or a relationship I've been unhappy in for 20 years." And then the next line, what energy work should I do to fix this? And it's like, we can do the energy work to help empower ourselves, but at some point, you know, you have to decide, is there a way you
Decide.
can,
That's the
yeah,
key word, decide.
you have to decide. People live in limbo for years and years and years, and there is nothing that's more draining on the body than living in limbo. I will tell you, the in between is far worse than any decision you can make, as far as I'm
Yes.
concerned. um, and we never know what the perfect decision is, but what's imperfect and unhealthy is to stay in the in between, on the on the verge of doing something for 10 years or 20 years. And what's unhealthy is trying to bypass your ability and empowerment in making a decision for your own life because you want to try to fix the feeling of being uncomfortable. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So I think when I'm talking about taking action and where you want to be, we have to be mindful that because of each of our own situations and socioeconomic factors and our own personal family, complexities, we can't always just stand up and live our lives to 100% of what we want. We can't just sometimes decide today we hate our job and we're not going to eat, we're not going to eat for the next 3 weeks because we're just going to quit. I mean, there are obviously logistical things, but it is our absolute responsibility to live our fullest potential within the means we have. And we have to be truthful about those means, right, Shannon? Because so much of what we think we can and can't do is belief and not fact. But making that decision that this is what I want, this is what I need, and then taking all necessary steps that you're able to get there. You just can't do enough energy work or meditation or yoga to get around the truth of having to change your own life. You can't. I've tried. I will tell you, I have tried, and it just doesn't work. You sometimes just have to do what you have to do to get where your heart knows it needs to be.
Yes, that is a bumper sticker, right?
Yep.
And you said it so best. I almost think closing down with one final question on there, because I want people to really sit with that and heal that, feel it, take it in, because you said it's the responsibility to live your life. And we have to take that responsibility, live within your own means, but really it comes back to us. And
Yes.
so thank you for that. Okay. One final question. Again, I'm so thankful that you came. I could keep talking to you for hours, but I want to respect everyone's time. And it's all about coming back to self. That's what I'm getting from you. What would you say the one takeaway would be from the book? If people are going to grab your book, that one thing you really want to leave them with when they finish the book and close your book.
Yeah, that you already have the connection to joy within you. Um, that is an inherent gift you have. The work is in releasing the trauma, the pressures you put on yourself, the expectations, the limits that are keeping you from being in deep connection to that joy.
Mm.
So, what I say in the book is nothing is wrong with you. If you're depressed, if you're anxious, if you can't get through your day, nothing is wrong with you. You are buried under a life that has kind of clobbered you and dampened your spirit, and your job is to start, even if it's 5 minutes a day, that's plenty. Start to release all of the stuff that has disconnected you from yourself, because as soon as you reconnect in even the smallest way, and I walk you through it from start to finish in the book, but even if you start a little bit at a day, if you start to connect and you get enough of that tiny spark of feeling what that connection to yourself is like, you can truly do anything.
Yes. Thank you for that. That's so wonderful. So where can people find you? Where can we connect with you more?
So everybody can find me on my website, which is amybscher, SCHER.com. I also have a YouTube channel with lots of little energy healing sessions. But if you go to my website, you'll find, my books, my blog, free stuff, whatever you want to explore there. And I'm so happy. It's been such a joy. Our theme of the day, it's been such a joy It's been such a joy to be
been
here.
so
Thank
good. Thank
you.
you. Thank you. Thank you. And it's been such a pleasure to talk to you and heal. And I will say also, Amy's free downloads are really, she sent me some of them and I've grabbed some too for healing, releasing, emotional kind of exercises you can do. So definitely go to her website and check that out. So thanks again, Amy. Congrats on your new book. It's out in the world. I know it's going to help so many. It's such a gift. So thanks for all the work you do.
Thank you, Shannon. Same to you.